preach this entire thing about how all these people don't like you, but that's fine and dandy because they can't, whatever, undo whatever it is that you're trying to do, and whatever you think God wants you to do in the world. Something. No weapon that's formed against you shall prosper. The funny thing about that verse is that when you read it in Hebrew, Hebrew makes a distinction between, Hebrew, the language, makes a distinction, for example, between you and you. It's two different words. I don't know if is Spanish like that? Does anyone know Spanish? Whenever you say you to a woman and you say you to a man, is it the same word? It is, isn't it? Yeah. But in Hebrew it's different. The funny thing about Isaiah 54:17, oh, looky there, my memory verse works well. Isaiah 54:17 is that the you in it is feminine. It's feminine singular. No weapon that's formed against you, feminine singular thing, shall prosper, because you look at it in context, it's absolutely clear that the thing that's being talked to isn't Roy Heller. It's not you, Isabella. It's not you. It's not you. The thing that's being talked to is Jerusalem. The city of Jerusalem. No weapon that's formed against you shall prosper. Because the city can't be destroyed. The city cannot be destroyed. Because God has made a promise to David that his kingdom and his throne will last forever. So that city's eternal. That throne's eternal, that palace is eternal, the city's eternal, and the walls are eternal. You can't knock them down. I don't know what it is. You get a huge, I don't know, battering ram. You get a huge bomb. You get an atomic bomb and you drop it right next to Jerusalem, and those walls aren't going anywhere. They're eternal. The city of Jerusalem cannot be destroyed. Keep that in mind over the next few days, or the next few times that we meet. The city of Jerusalem cannot be destroyed. It doesn't matter who comes against it. It can't be destroyed. You can see on the back, this is just a little thing, and that is that there's a difference, I've already mentioned one of them, between Zion theology and Deuteronomistic theology. It's based on land-grant treaty or it's based on vassal treaty. Is it breakable? Oh, the Deuteronomistic covenant can be broken. In fact, it's broken quite a bit. As long as you don't remember, you're going to break the covenant. Right? Sin, forgetfulness. Zion, you can't break it. You can't break it. It's eternal. Well, yeah, Zion theology is eternal. We just read it 3 times, forever. Again, beating the dead horse. Deuteronomistic theology, is it eternal? Well, of course not, because you can break it. It's breakable, but it can be renewed. Even in exile, if you remember, those late things that God added to Deuteronomy. Even in exile, even when you're cast out of the land, if you turn, if you start paying attention, start noticing, you start focusing on loving the Lord your God with everything you do, everything you are, everything you think. If you speak about it to your children, if you think about it every time you walk through the door, if you think about it every time you look in a mirror, if you think about it every time you look, right, then even there God will gather you back. So it's breakable, but it's renewable. The covenant with David, it's not breakable. It's forever. There's nothing that David has to do. There's nothing that the son has to do. There's nothing that any of the descendants have to do. It's top down. Even if the descendants sin, that will be dealt with. It's eternal. They can't break this covenant. A primary requirement, Deuteronomistic theology, is obedience. And again, obedience, not just flat-footed obedience, but actually paying attention, noticing, focusing. Right? A primary requirement for Zion theology is trust. You just have to trust this. Just trust. It's a top-down thing. There's nothing you can do. Just trust in that. A response to sin, Deuteronomistic theology is punishment, that is exile. Zion theology is discipline, but again, you can't break it. And then finally, the spatial center of Deuteronomistic theology is the land, because that's what we're going into. That's what we don't want to lose by not paying attention to this. And obviously, the Zion theology, the spatial center, isn't the land as a whole. It's Jerusalem, because that's what's eternal. So far, so good? Go. And verse 17, going back to the Bible. In verse 17, in accordance with all these words and with all this vision, Nathan spoke to David. So did Nathan tell David exactly what he heard? Yeah, absolutely, because the narrator tells us that he actually does that. And then starting in 18 and basically going through the end of the chapter, David announces he goes into the tent and pronounces this very long prayer that basically says, "Thank you very much. I accept." So he accepts this covenant. In chapter 18, interestingly enough, it says that God is going to give him rest from all of his enemies all around. In the very next chapter, it's a bunch of wars that break out all around. At the very end of that, in verse 15, we have a list of David's officers. David reigned over all Israel. David administered justice and equity to all his people. That's really good. That's a good thing. I'm not going to argue. Yeah, absolutely. Joab, the son of Zeruiah, was over the army. Remember him. And he's still over the army. Jehoshaphat, the son of Eliud, was recorder, who was the scribe. Zadok, the son of Achitub, and Ahimelech, the son of Abiathar, were priests, and they are, because we've met them before in the story. Sariah was a secretary. Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, was over the Cherethites and the Pelethites. These were special types of warriors, special ops for David, right? And also David's sons were priests. David, what tribe does he come from? He comes from Levi, doesn't he? No. He comes from Judah. Sure. That's funny how they became priests. It's kind of like, it's funny because it reminds me a lot of Samuel making his sons judges. But I'm sure I'm just misreading it. I'm sure I'm absolutely sure. Chapter 9, Saul has one more son called Mephibosheth, and he can't walk very well, and so what David does is that he asks him to come and live with him, and he eats at David's table every single meal. Every single meal, Mephibosheth is going to be sitting right there at David's table. 3 times a day, right there at David's table. I wonder why David wants Mephibosheth to sit at his table. To what?
Your enemies close.
Exactly. Keep your friends close, your enemies closer. Absolutely, because this is the heir, right? And there are still people in the north that, find the assassination of Abner and Ishbaal rather suspicious. Keep them close, or keep them very close. Absolutely, because if you remember, again, I don't know if you read this, but there were times in which David didn't show up at Saul's table, and Saul knew that there was a conspiracy against him. By David's not present. So every single meal, Mephibosheth is always going to be at David's table. On the other hand, maybe he just has compassion on this poor kid who just, he's lost his whole family, and so he just wants to help him. There was a guy called Leonard Rost, and he wrote a book called, I'm not going to do it in German, you're welcome. And this was in 1923, I think it was. The Throne Succession of David. And what Leonard Rost does in this book is that he says that 2 Samuel 9 through 20 and 1 Kings 1 through 2 are a separate block of material that have been inserted into the story. If you take this out, you don't lose anything. You would never notice if you take this block out. that this block of material has been inserted, starting with the Mephibosheth story, has been inserted in. And what this throne succession story does, and you can see in the title itself, is that what this throne succession story is about the throne succession. And that is that God has just promised that one of David's sons is going to take over after him. Right? David has lots of sons. Oh my God, we need to stop. So David has lots of sons. So we'll have to pick up next time, because this is a really important story. So David has lots of sons. So which son is that going to be? And I can tell you, there's going to be lots of options. Lots of options from the sons about themselves, about who that chosen son is. And some of those sons, for example, like Absalom, like that throne really well. And so we might as well get on with it and get rid of David. I mean, he's trying to kill his own father. He's trying to kill the king. Well, God's not going to put up with that.
No, forever.
Of course not, forever.
We got forever.
Absolutely. And so even if Absalom does kill the king, there's nothing you can do about it. He becomes king. So what this one, and again we'll read a very famous story having to do with, that's right, Bathsheba. We'll read a very famous selection of this. And again, let me just say this one last thing. And this is, for me at least, particularly the sixth sense moment in the Bible as a whole. Because up to this point, if Roy Heller were not leading this class, if some, I don't know, simple-minded person, gullible person were leading this class, I can tell you that you would think that David is just the sweetest thing since sliced bread. As long as you overlook certain things. And I can tell you, starting in chapter 9 and going forward, particularly the next story that we're going to read, what happens is that you get well into David's story, and suddenly you start realizing who he is and what's been going on behind your back or under the table all this time. Up to chapter 9, what we've been doing is seeing David, in a sense, from the outside. What starts happening in the throne succession narrative is that we walk through the looking glass. And now we're at the court of David. And I can tell you it's a very different picture. And that's where we'll stop right now. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I think you should get a few royalties from the 6 cents.